I am State Senator Ann Rivers from the 18th Legislative District. I've served as the senator of this district for 8 years, about. I was trying to count up on my way home from Olympia yesterday how many sessions I had served, and I think it's something along the line of 24 because we've had so many special sessions. I am so appreciative that you would come and spend part of this beautiful day with us and to engage with us. We kind of wanted to give you an update about what's happening in Olympia and answer any questions that you may have. And then just let you, for those of you who are new to the area and just finding out what's going on here, we want to get to know you as well and you to get to know us, so you feel comfortable reaching out and partnering with us in your government. So I serve on the Rules Committee, which determines the flow of bills in the Senate. I serve on Ways and Means, not only how funds are raised, but how they are spent. I serve on healthcare, which is top of mind for so many people today. And then Environment, Energy, and Technology, which is a brand new committee for me. I was taken off education to serve on that committee. So that's, those are the committees that I serve on. I've got, I think, 7 or 9 key pieces of legislation still moving through the process. If I'm lucky, I'll end up with 1 because it's not easy to get a bill through. I'm serving as the Republican whip for our caucus this year as well. So it's been a crazy time, and I will pass it off now to Representative Brandon Vick.
Well, thank you all. My name is Brandon Vick. I've been your state representative for, this is the 7th year now, actually, 4th term. And it's been a much different year in Olympia. We had this little election, things changed a little, and maybe been a little more tense, but it's been going pretty well, I think. We just passed our first big cutoff. And what that means is any bill that needed to go to the Senate from the House had to pass through the House and vice versa. That is largely true. There are some ways to get around the system. If a bill is necessary to implement the budget, well, so it would cost something. Things can still change. But really policy, we kind of know what's going and what's not at this point. And there's some good, there's some bad. We can get to all of that. In my opinion. My committees, I am the ranking member. We call it Consumer Protection and Business. That is banking, insurance, consumer protection, licensing policy, those various things. I serve on the Commerce and Gaming Committee. That is all of your vices, alcohol, tobacco, marijuana, and gambling. And then finance. So that's tax policy. In the House, we separate spending and taxing policy. Been doing all those committees most of my career with a few more thrown in, but things have been busy for sure. Like Ann, I do have some bills still moving. I think I have 4 at the moment. And the one I'm probably most proud of is one that I think Ann's going to get the victory on. But it's having to do with highly capable students, identifying them correctly, getting them into the right programs, making sure that we're taking care of all the kids in our education system and making sure they get the education they need and deserve. And that's something that has been important to me for all 7 years. I happen to be one of those kids in school, but we got to do a better job with them. So that's a brief summary. We'll get to the details, but that's me this year.
My name is Larry Hoff. I'm your new state representative. Ann's been in the legislature for 8 years, Brandon 7. I'm on my 8th week. So it's a different degree of learning curve for me. It's been a whirlwind 8 weeks, I've got to tell you. A new legislator can't imagine all of the processes, the challenges, the kind of the things that he or she needs to learn until you're in that spot. And it has definitely been, again, a whirlwind 8 weeks. I'm on labor and workplace standards, where all of the issues that have to deal with employees and employer relations and anything like that. A lot of public union issues go through that committee. And it's been very active this year. If you've been watching the legislature, you'll see that there are quite a few bills there. Another one is one of the committees I serve on with Representative Vick. It's the Consumer Protection and Business Committee. contracts that deal with insurance companies, banks, credit unions, things like that go through that committee. And then I'm on appropriations, which I've asked for, and I'm not sure why now, because they meet late hours. Every bill that involves a dime or a dollar of your money comes through that committee, and so we've had several midnight adjournments just because the volume of things that deal with the legislature to deal with money and deal with your money. So we're pretty excited to take our time when it comes to looking at those issues. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. One thing that I'm excited about is I found the bathrooms. So they don't tell you where they're at as a freshman, so you have to search them out like that. There's a lot of freshman things that I'm learning, but I'm excited to make sure that I continue that learning regimen, and very happy to be there. Thank you for putting me there.
Okay, so with that, now you know a little bit more about us, and we would like to offer you an opportunity to ask questions or share in general how you think it's going, what you'd like to see more of, what you'd like to see less of, that kind of thing. So opening it up to you now.
There is no reason in my mind why all kids shouldn't be vaccinated. My son is vaccinated. I'm asking my daughter-in-law and my son to follow that regimen, the recommended regimen that for my grandson. I believe in vaccinations. What I struggle with, ma'am, is telling parents, all of our parents in the 18th district, that they have to have their children vaccinated. I understand the community importance of that. I understand the health concern, and I'm in favor of minimizing that type of outbreak or inbreak. But I simply can't take that vote, my one vote, to take that liberty away from parents, or that responsibility. I'm sure that there are differences of opinion about that in this room, but that's essentially where my vote was.
Well, and for me, this is one of those things where you have a title of a bill and then you have the details of the bill. For me, I think the bill was broken. If you wanted to make a nexus that said, taxpayer-funded schools should require vaccines, there's at least a nexus of government and funding and those type of things in there. And if the bill stopped there, I think I would have had a different discussion. I don't know what my vote would have been at that point. But for me, the bill included private daycares. The bill included private schools. The bill went farther than I think government could or should go in this situation. So honestly, I think it was a broken bill. I understand the concerns of the community who is not wanting to vaccinate. Personally, our family is, and that was a good choice, I believe. But really, I think right-sizing a bill and getting the right nexus between government and those regulations is what we should do, and I just don't think we met it in this case.
So those bills did not make it out of the Senate. The bill in the Senate was far more expansive than what passed through the House. In this time of individualized health care, parents are now getting their children's DNA done prior to anything. They get their kids' DNA done, and doctors can look at the DNA results and say your child should not be vaccinated. There are specialists who do that, and in our area, those specialists live in Portland. The problem is that Washington State does not accept the medical exemption from Oregon. So you have people who are told your child should not be vaccinated, it would be damaging to them, that come across the river, and now they can't get the medical exemption. And I talked to several pediatricians, and I said, fully expecting them to say, no, you know what, every child should be vaccinated. And they said, we like to maintain the personal exemption because there are some kids who should not be vaccinated, and the personal exemption saves us a bunch of headache.
I mean,
They don't want to, that's my whole point, they don't want to write the medical exemption because then they come under fire from the Medical Commission and the Department of Health. And you have to understand this. So my background is history and political science, and I did a lot of research on the Tuskegee Airmen and what happened when it was actually the CDC who ran the experiment where these individuals with syphilis were left to be studied instead of treated. So there is significant lack of trust, and so I do think my kids are fully vaccinated, I'm vaccinated. No, that's not true. I didn't get them one of the vaccinations because after I read about it, there was too much mortality included with it. So I didn't do that one. But the whole point is that parents know their children at a level that I never did when I was having my children. They know them on the molecular level using science, and I want to preserve those parents' rights. So that's where I'm at with that.
Can I comment on this as well? I am a parent that my child died 46 days after receiving a vaccination. So there is that risk. And although I had all my children vaccinated, because I believed in the system and I trusted the doctors, and this is back in '89. But we've learned a lot. A lot has happened in these 30 years. And yes, we've made some progress, but still, I want to have that choice because I didn't know that my son would be, I didn't know that. Right. You know, you don't, so it's really important to keep our medical freedom choices because we know our children. And after that, I did not have my children vaccinated with that vaccine. It's a learning, you know, but I just had to say.
But I will say, this is an emotionally charged issue. And it's been too easy to separate people into two camps and to breed the frustration and anger between the two. So I just want to say to both of you, I am so appreciative about the civility that you displayed, because there's a feeling like one side is diminishing the other side, and that doesn't move any of us forward. So thank you to both of you. Thank you for sharing your painful story.
By the way, that difference isn't partisan.
No.
That difference of opinion resides within the parties. So it's how we talk about differences of opinion. I think that makes a difference, if I can overuse that word.
Go ahead.
But
hearing your answers, because you can look online and see, oh, vote yes, vote no, but you don't know the individual thought.
Bingo.
Yeah. But just to be clear, and as sort of a final thing, something that I felt that has not been reported very well is that this was contained. The measles outbreak really was an inbreak. It was fully contained in one church. No, and I candidly, I thought it was really, I thought it was a little fear-mongering that the children who went to the public schools had never been contagious while at the schools, but it created all of this fear about, you know, what if my kid was the kid whose vaccine failed and now he's exposed? The children were never in school when they were, and so I felt like it was really whipped up. And candidly, I'm just going to freely admit, when I first saw it, I was whipped up too. I was really nervous, and then when I did the research, I was like, oh, it was contained to one church, and I think that more outreach can be done, but I think that for now it's under control, and I think that there should be more emphasis on education and some other things like that. So, any other thoughts about vaccination?
I was just making the comment that it was never shared in the media, that it was contained in a small amount, because they didn't want, they wanted to explode.
Yeah, it didn't serve the headline, I guess, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's also important to note that the exemption doesn't just protect a child who should not have the immunization that is contraindicated for them. medically by the CDC, you can have a child who should not receive a vaccination, and yet the doctor won't sign the exemption, and then you have a sibling, a genetic match, who is not protected until they too are injured. I have a severely injured child. He's 15. He will be dependent on the state for the rest of his life, and I can't do that to my other two children.
These are some of the stories that don't really get told. I had a mom from my district whose child died of encephalopathy after receiving an injection, and people say, well, maybe it wasn't connected, but on the death certificate it says from immunization, that the cause of death was immunization. And so it's heartbreaking. None of us want that for any other parent. We fear that. So I think it's really important. And here's the reality. This is another thing I found really interesting that wasn't really reported. 77% of the kids in Southwest Washington are vaccinated, fully vaccinated. But you don't get to count other kids in that number until they've had all. So you've got a whole nother slew of kids who are on the road to being fully vaccinated. So it's actually, I want to say it's 90, in the mid 90s of kids who are actually on the road to being fully vaccinated. But again, that doesn't really fit the narrative. So it's something, these are the sorts of details that we have to take a deep dive. And candidly, and I think I shared this with you, I started off being, we just need to have everybody be vaccinated. And then the more research I did, the more I thought, yeah, and more parents I came into contact. I really just want to preserve parents' rights to make the decision. They know their kid, I don't, so.
Well, we started off with a great topic.
Okay, from this, everything else is easy, so what's next?
First, this event was funded with state dollars, so we have a line we can't cross.
No, you go ahead. I'm talking all the time.
Well, a little bit of an experience from a freshman's point of view on majority and minority, and maybe we can talk about that without crossing a line. There is a certain kind of functioning process when you are in a significant minority as opposed to majority. On top of the fact that there are, I mean, your primary issue was taxes and how we're able to spend your money rather liberally. But I think, and in fact, Senator Rivers has mentioned this before, I think it's important to have a split form of government. That you get the ability to compromise more and to come together with better solutions for the citizens than it is now. The majority party, again, a bunch of good people, they just have a majority now, are running things in Olympia, and you will see a variety of different tax proposals, different bills come out that we would suggest might not be the right way. But again, it's how that you've heard the words, elections have consequences. Elections have consequences, and we're seeing that in Olympia.
There's a lot of proposals around to help deal with the issue. I mean, we are going to see some relief on property taxes this year, which is good. Personally, I have a few ideas floating around. The first is if the state has excess revenue, a portion of that has to go back as sort of a kicker, like Oregon does on their income tax. It's a little trickier to do in Washington because we can't just assign a certain dollar amount per income, but that's an idea we're working with. Not making a lot of progress this year. Another one that floats around in my mind is that we fund transportation wrong. We have to go out and pass a gas tax or do something in order to fund these roads. So I have a proposal that I'm working on that kind of combines what Utah and Texas do and says if there's extraordinary growth, that goes into transportation, and maybe we could use some capital budget funds. I see the city guys cringing when I say that, but I mean, so I think there's a lot of legitimate proposals out there to do better, and I also think this year is not going to be easy. The the silver lining is it's really tough to pass a straight face test and say we don't have enough money. We're up another $2 billion plus. People are building, people are buying, people are doing all the things that fund the government. So there's no shortage, there's no reduction in revenue. But that battle's the one we're having right now.
I agree.
Well, can some of the extra funds that are coming in be set aside, a rainy day fund for when we go into the next recession?
We have a rainy day fund, but it can only be tapped into for emergencies, like natural emergencies. For example, when there are ridiculous firefighters or forest fires. not for all my firefighters, I love you.
Cut that from the tape.
Yeah. When we have ridiculous forest fires where we have to fly in firefighters from other places and pay them, we can tap into the rainy day fund to pay for that. But we can't just tap into it for any reason. And so we do set aside, in fact, our rainy day fund is the healthiest that it's ever been. It was actually, our rainy day fund was created by my predecessor, Joe Zarelli. So who knew, right?
And implemented by the voters. It is a little complex, but really we take roughly half of the extra revenue we receive, we put it in the rainy day fund, and it takes a 2/3 vote of the legislature to spend it. So it's not an easy thing to spend. It would need to be spent on an emergency. To that end, they got 2/3 of the vote last year and took some of that money. Well, they worked around the system, took some of that money and helped do this school funding balancing. So it's not a perfect system, but I think there's a couple $1 billion sitting in that fund right now. And I mean, that will be good because there will be a recession at some point. Or a priority that's just that important that 2/3 of us will vote for it.
I think that gets back to what Larry was saying about, even though we've got all of this revenue, they're still looking at about $5.5 billion more in taxes because extraordinary won't cover, even though it should. But it's really the majority minority thing. I mean, you'll be getting about a 30% break on your I guess it's now spring and fall property taxes that are the state schools part of it. You're going to get a pretty significant break, and an ongoing.
It went up higher to begin with.
Right, it went higher. You're going to see a reduction, but then you're going to see another reduction because you were already paying high taxes to begin with. So you are actually going to see long-term property tax relief. But having said that, we just fought off an attempt to jack up the local levies even more again this year, which would have put you in yet another higher tax debt. So it's trying to find the balance in all of the things we do, but you know,
what was the budget 10 years ago was $34 billion, was that correct?
$32 billion.
So 10 years ago, the budget for the state of Washington was $32 billion.
I think that was 8 years ago.
My seniors, you know, but in
My
any
first
case,
budget was $34 billion.
so around 34 billion. Yeah. It's now 54 billion. $20 billion in additional expenses, additional, you know, getting into your pockets and pulling money into the state in the past 8 to 10 years. It, in my opinion, I'm a bean counter by profession. I have a degree in accounting, and unfortunately, it gives me pause several times when I see a bunch of bills that create additional government. And that's not to, by the way, I'm not up here suggesting that all government programs and all government agencies are failing and we should, you know, cut it by half. That's not the case. We have services that are wonderful here in the state, and we need to support those. But my gosh, at some point in time, we need to put the brakes on, and that's if you take a look at how I believe the three of us, how our votes stack up, you'll see that a lot of times we are suggesting that we've got too much government.
So we wrote a letter to the governor asking him to reimburse the state for the millions. By way of background for all of you, Jay Inslee has 10 security guards with him at all times. He's flying all over the country to get ready for the presidential primaries. So the cost, here's another thing no one's thinking about. When the lieutenant governor fills in for the governor, he gets time and a half, and time and a half of $175,000 is a lot of money. So it's millions of dollars that the taxpayers are paying to support his presidential run. We sent him a letter saying, come on, pay for it out of your campaign funds. That's what they're for. Don't make the people of this state pay for that. And if there's a one of you that thinks that Jay Inslee is really running for president, Jay Inslee is running to be the head of the EPA. So he can bow out and say, hey, Bernie, I bowed out. I gave you my support. Now will you pick me as your EPA director? So it's cynical, but he's in all of the polls, he's at 0%, so he's just a nuisance to everyone else right now. Sorry if you love Jay Inslee, but he's costing us a lot of money to get a position that he wants down the road. And if I'm wrong, I will happily buy anyone a cup of coffee who, who wants to tell me I was wrong. I voted no for several reasons. First of all, the bill put in front of me does absolutely nothing to help with climate change. Zero. It's a big dollar generator. Second, Washington State is currently 77% clean. 77%. Everybody goes, we have to be like California. California is at 23%. So if we want to go there, okay, we can go there. Next, it's not our relations with China, it's the fact that we're terrible recyclers. Fred Rivers, where are you? I'm talking to you. Because Fred puts the wrong stuff in Big Blue. So you do that, look. So what's happened is China says, figure out your recycling. But here's the good outcome of that. We have businesses popping up in Washington State, so we don't have to ship our recycling to China anymore. Now we are becoming self-sufficient. And here's the other thing. We talk a ton about recycling, but there's another thing we never talk about, and that's reusing. Reuse it, don't recycle it. We have this idea that when we put something in Big Blue, we're saving the planet. The reality is anything we don't put in Big Blue only benefits all of us. So we have to be creative in our reuse. I voted against it for lots of reasons, some of which you've just heard. But the reality is it doesn't move the meter. We proposed an 80% clean plan because the only place left to go now is the tailpipe. So 30 cents more per gallon that buys you nothing for your roads, buys you nothing for cleaning the environment. It's punitive. It's a stick rather than a carrot. With the 80% clean plan, we reward the people who are doing good, who of their own volition have made a choice because they know that that's what the market is demanding. And we do nothing to reward those people at all. So I won't, and in fact, here's the bottom line. That's basically the initiative that 58% of the state just voted down. So to ram something in that even the people of the state, it didn't pass their sniff test, arguably one of the most liberal states in the nation, and it didn't pass their sniff test, but we're going to implement it by law. And it's something that we're not doing with the people, it's something that we're doing to the people for no effect. Just didn't seem to make sense to me. 2 points.
If I voted against what Senator Rivers did, I'd lose my bathroom permission. So I can't do that. But seriously, the bill that came through the House that Senator Rivers talked about briefly was the carbon fuel standards. And when we did the analysis, it showed that we were just asking all of you to pay more for gas, and with very little benefit in the long run for climate. we all need to be good stewards of our climate. Look at this. I mean, look at our rivers and look at our air and look at our sunshine. We need to be good stewards of that. But we don't need to be jumping ahead of the game and suggest that we just need to charge everybody an additional 15 cents or 30 cents or whatever the case might be. And then think like if you build it, they will come. We need to understand that there is an objective behind our direction, and there just hasn't been so far. Senator Rivers talked about a bill that would minimize some of the pain at the gas pump, and yet provide incentives for establishing some standards, and we would be supportive of that more than simply a fee up front. Kind of falls back on the question about taxes and where the rest of our money is going. It's an interesting dilemma, not one that any party is necessarily opposed to in Olympia. By the way, did you come up to Olympia with your class?
Yeah, with the Campus Youth Advisory.
Yeah, it was an interesting day there. I enjoy that immensely to hear from you guys. But in any case, that would be my opinion, kind of a global opinion on that whole matter.
I would just
one more thing, and you might look at the rest of my environmental record.
Well, and I would just add, there's so many environmental related bills. I feel like we're probably not talking about the one that you specifically mentioned right there.
You're not at all.
And I have no idea what that bill is, but the title sounds like a decent title, so that's something I'll have to look up. Not dumping toxic waste sounds okay.
Well, they will be excited because the bill passed.
Yes, it did. It did. So I committed my vote as a yes vote on that because even though I'm going to share with you my reservation, but I'm going to vote yes because my mom, my dad, and my eldest sister all died from lung cancer, and they all started smoking when they were 14 and 15 years old. And every single one of them I asked, I said, do you wish you had never started? And they all responded, I wish somebody would have stopped me from, they could never kick the habit. And so that's why I'm a yes, but I will here's my reservation. So I have the Cowlick Smoke Shop at my exit. I'm gonna wrap my husband out a little bit. So my husband was just almost done. He was trying to quit chew. He was almost done. They opened up the smoke shop, and now he's up to a can a day because it's cheap. And guess what? They don't have to because they are their own government. They do not have to respect any of our laws. And why would they, when they're the only ones who can serve what we would consider underage kids, why would they shut that down? Because it's a profit center for them. So I've spent a lot of time trying to shut down the black market in marijuana so that kids can't have access anymore. And I see Tobacco 21 has the strong possibility of starting a black market for that industrious youth who drives up to La Center, buys a ton, brings it back, and sells it at a much higher rate. That's why. But having said that, if you don't live close to the casino, you know, maybe not a big deal. And so that I'm supporting it, but it's been something that's really been tearing me apart because I feel like as long as the Indian reservation is there and they can charge or they can serve anyone they like without respect to state law, I feel like we're sort of on a wing and a prayer. We're sort of just hoping. I
would just to touch on the ASB bill. I think again, good bill with a problem, and the problem is school districts like Bellevue. Bellevue literally charges $800 a student for ASB fees. That is not the state's problem. That is Bellevue's problem. And if Bellevue got serious, they could bring some of those fees down. I think if we were dealing with $25 and $50 ASB fees and that was the hurdle to get kids involved in activities in school, I think we'd all be there right away. So not letting poor behaving districts off the hook is part of the answer in there too. I think we can probably get there, but just some of those things. There's so many details that we still don't even know. But when you're using ASB as a slush fund for something else, that's kind of a problem too. So.
And to add to that, I'm a graduate from WSUV Vancouver. You know, after I finished my degree last May, I looked at it and I ended up paying a lot more in student fees than actually, if I calculate, I'm like, I could have costed me one course of a class, which is $1,300 almost a semester. And I don't know where those fees went.
Wow.
And I mean, they only opened up a health center my junior year, which is, I was about a year out before I graduated. So I think there's accountability, and that's just a university perspective, but I just to think about, I think there's accountability that has to be, because it really costs students a lot.
And it sounds like transparency too.
Yes.
So you know where your money's going. Transparency is
Let me
always good.
address the accountability issue for just a second. I might not gain a lot of friends in here. The challenge that we have in the legislature, and again, this is kind of looking through it with new eyes, is that there is so much we can do for everybody. When we see bills in all of our committees, a lot of the bills are written very well. They suggest that we should raise the plateaus for additional lunches or additional student assistance or whatever the case might be from every spectrum of our lifestyle. The challenge that we have is that we have so much money to do that with, and I don't want to make excuses for not picking up more fees or doing whatever the case might be, but it's an interesting dilemma certainly for seasoned legislators, and the new ones coming in are getting this on our plate immediately. It's a function a little bit of where we should spend the money more prudently, or more. We talked about transparency or the accounting for those functions. Where do we get the most good for the most bucks, and then try and not hose our citizens to the extent that we're feeling about property taxes and things like that. So it's an interesting.
So funny thing. This is an example of what Larry's talking about. We had a bill come through Energy, Environment, and Technology, and the funding mechanism for the bill was the litter account for the highway cleanup. So we're going to take all the money away from the highway cleanup, and I don't know if you all have noticed, our roads look horrible. I mean, there's just trash everywhere. It's gross. So, but we're taking that money and we're going to put it to this instead. And it's just like you're at some point you're just rearranging the decks or the chairs on the deck of the Titanic. It's just like, let's just keep, let's figure something out. But it's not okay to just gut this account to pay for this thing, because then all of this suffers. It just seems a really silly way to do business. So I was on the McCleary work group,
yes.
And we passed 2242 in 2007. And our goal was to increase the per pupil funding, which we did. Do you teach in Camas or Washougal?
Camas.
So
I got the paper.
You got it?
Yeah.
So you can see where you were in 2012, and you can see where you are now. And it's probably about $4,000 more per pupil in Camas than it was before. But what happened was we put in 2242, we had a system in process whereby the students or the school districts would, first of all, not negotiate any contracts that were not currently due, that they would, did you know that?
I'm following you, yes.
Yeah, not many people know that. So that if your contract wasn't up, you couldn't see this big pot of money and go, hey, I want that. You had to wait until your contract was due and negotiate at that time. And the reason that we did that, we put a bunch of money in, which was programmatic for career and technical education. We had about $80 million. And for special education, not as much as we needed, but still a significant amount. And then what happened, the very last bill written by Senator Lisa Wallman of the 2018 session took away all of the guardrails that we put in that bill. So we put this money in, and then instead of negotiating for it when contracts were up, all of the contracts were opened up, and there were strikes, and there were threats of strikes by teachers. And so the school districts being held over a barrel now have they've negotiated unsustainable contracts. And so what's going to happen is the young new teachers or just newer teachers are probably going to lose their jobs because there's no more money coming from the state. I think we'll make another significant investment in special education, but there's no more money. And I feel candidly that the union was not straight up. As I was watching their website, they were showing that they had 22% increase here, 25% increase there. But then when I would talk to the teachers, they're like, no, they can say that. But it was just a method to try and pressure school districts like Camas and Evergreen, Vancouver, to get what they wanted. And here's the sad reality. Now, the folks who make the school run, our PSE members, our custodians, our lunch ladies, our bus drivers, guess what? There's nothing left for them because there's no more money. So you can throw around words like levy swap or whatever. We increased the state common schools levy, which is the constitutionally mandated way that we have to fund our schools, and we decreased the local levy so that for example, Seattle paying $112 $1,000 while Battleground pays $568 $1,000. We had to create equity for our teachers, for our students, and for our taxpayers. And so when all of the guardrails were taken out by the Wellman bill, which actually went out on a party line vote of both bodies, then all the safeguards were gone. So that's how we got to this place. And I guess it was a situation of take it all now at the peril of the district budget, or get your incremental increases in 2 years' time. And when the former was chosen, it threatened the stability of the entire system. So I can't tell you the number of media interviews I gave where I outlined this, but let's just admit it's not, in this day and age, it's not going to sell newspapers. And then the other thing is, in the summertime, my interim job is I'm a bev cart girl, and I work every single day, and so I legislate, I take meetings when I can, but I have a real job too, sort of, if you want to call Bev Carter a real job. But
a golf course or something?
It really is at a golf, yeah. Because I'm a public affairs professional by trade, public and governmental, so I am very limited what I can do in the interim because because of state ethics laws. So I have to get permission to get, and this was the first job that I gave them that they said, yeah, you can do that, no problem.
I just want to add on the school funding in general too. There's some superintendents are telling people that the state's taking away their local levy money. And while that might be true if you only consider one side of the story, the part that's not relayed is we backfilled it plus more. Yeah. The reason we have the McCleary lawsuit was because we had inequity among districts. Camas and Vancouver and Evergreen could pass whatever levy they want. The voters would say yes, they had a bunch of money. A school district on the east side could never pass their levy, and therefore they were having the basic level of funding in education. So that's where the inequities came about. What the state did was say, we're going to hold everyone harmless, first of all. And the second thing we're going to do is go in and set this new state property tax and bring everyone up to an equal level. In order to be compliant, in order to be legal, we cannot go back in and raise those local levies because we'll have our lawsuit number 2. When you start letting certain districts get better education than other districts, that's where we have the legal problem. I don't think there's a district that got less money out of McCleary. There's 295, so maybe there was one of them that did. Locally, it's sure not true. Richfield was probably the closest as far as coming out as a wash, but even they're up a little bit too. So we'll have these chats with our superintendents more, but we're not going to raise that levy cap, or at least I'm going to do my best to make sure we don't.
We'll see. Again, don't forget, Erica, that the program wasn't supposed to be fully implemented till 2020. But because there was the force to renegotiate the contracts to get the money, early. Now there's pain because the slow ramp up ended up becoming more like a cliff. And when that happened, then you guys were in a spot. I did not have one superintendent tell me that they couldn't have made do with a 3.1% increase if they could have functioned well with the 3.1% increase that was outlined in 2242, but because they had to go beyond that, that's where they fell into trouble. So in 2020, when hopefully things have caught back up and it's smoothed off, I think that you're going to see a different story.
And you make a good point. It's complex. Your superintendent has been in all of our offices trying to break down the complexity, and again, Senator Rivers and Representative Vick understand that complexity. I'm getting into my learning curve was steeper, but it's starting to be helped by your superintendent that came up. He came up and broke this down. Regionalization is another one that he's talked about. Those are issues that if indeed they continue to be without a solution, or indeed the McCleary Act doesn't mature in and of itself, there'll have to be some tweaks somewhere.
And I just add to that too, that there are some relief valves we're going to push this year. Doing better on special ed funding is going to push that relief valve for other parts of the budgets, and that might be helpful. And then the other one is this new SEB, this new healthcare program. I think we're going to do some adjustments there that maybe free up some other funds to do some other things. My overall point I want to make, and this is true of everything though, is there's a dream number that everyone's going to have for every program, and that's not what we get to deal with. I mean, we've got this budget, it's going to be $50 billion plus. Right now, 52% of that's going to education. Can we make 3/4 of that go to education? No, we can't. Can we have a $60 billion budget? No, we can't. So it still is about properly prioritizing things and figuring out which chess piece goes where. You know, I mean, who doesn't want their kid's teacher to have everything in the world? I mean, I think we all do. But look, there's a reality of budgeting too. So I think there's a conscious effort to get it right. I think we'll always be short in somebody's eyes. But I also think we fully acknowledge there are things we can and will do this year to push some of those relief valves.
I just think $36,000.
Do you want to be at home and get your care, or do you want to be in a nursing home?
$36,000 isn't going to even last 6 months. No. And that's all you get under this program. And the money that is taken directly out of everyone else's paycheck. I mean, on the surface, I love it because I think that we have to do something to help people. But here's what people, again, bill title politics, here's what people don't know about this. The interest from all of this money is going to pour back into the general fund. It's going to be capitalized by, and a certain amount of money will be allowed to go to people in the amount of $36,000 a year. When it costs about $7,000 a month to be in a senior care facility, when it costs $40,000 a year to have someone come to your home and clean your toilets and maybe help you with meals and that kind of thing, then
That's not true.
That's not even close.
I'm a caregiver myself, and I don't even get paid that much.
no, but if you work for an organization, you're not getting all the money that all of the money that is being paid out for the care.
She's an
Whoever,
she works for herself.
do you belong to the SEIU? Well, they're taking, what, 5% right off the top? No. So, yes, they do. Yeah, they do. I've done so much research on this. So my whole thing is this. I do believe we need to do something with long-term care. Say that out. How many, raise your hand if you could survive on $36,000 a year.
It's total.
Total.
That's it.
Lifetime.
That's one year.
Lifetime.
Lifetime. But I mean, you would spend that in less than a year. So why should we're going to collect a bunch of money from people? We're going to take it. We're going to put it in a fund, and then we're going to take that money the extra, the interest on billions of dollars, and we're gonna flow it through to the and it's not even gonna be invested by the State Investment Board. So I agree we have to do something. This plan is deeply flawed, and that's why I supported the, there's another plan that creates a state option 401k. So that people who aren't savvy in terms of investment can work with the State Investment Board and put money in out of their own paycheck to care for their care down the road if they want to do that. Not mandatory, but if you want to do it. My husband does all my stuff. I would take advantage because I don't get investing personal money and all of that. But I like the idea. I think it's a great idea, and we do have a problem. This, however, does not represent a solution.
It's an income tax. You can't couch it anywhere else. It's a 0.5% income tax on everything you earn, and probably, and I'm gonna build up my seatmate here, but probably one of the best floor analysis I've heard this year is from Representative Vick on the specifics wrapped around the funding vehicle of this and who gets, how indeed it does get funded and who can take advantage of it.
So I have to remember all that?
Yes, you do.
So I want to start with a few baselines. First, there's a problem. Long-term care is expensive. That's the reason the private insurance market's getting out of it, because they can't make the actuarial tables work. You can't, I mean, my grandfather just passed before session, but 8 years in an adult family home. Well, there's no inheritance for Brandon left, I know that much. But, you know, I mean, this is expensive stuff. It's $6,000 a month just for the staying in the facility and getting the meals, right? So we have a problem. People aren't saving. And really, I probably would be in favor of some sort of option where you could invest your own money to build towards these ends. My problem with this proposal is this is worse than Social Security as far as how it's going to be stabilized. Literally in the legislation, for the last 3 years of your working life, you have to work 208 hours a year for 3 years. Now, if you are making 15 bucks an hour because this is your, you know, out the door job, you're greeting at Walmart, you're doing whatever the heck you're doing, 15 bucks an hour, 200 hours a year, you're literally putting $45 into the system over your last 3 years of working. You're going to get a benefit of $36,000 out of that. That's a broken system. No insurance company would fund that, and there's a reason they wouldn't, because you would be out of business real quick. And my legitimate fear about this proposal is that you retire in Oregon, you retire in Idaho, you retire in Montana, you come here, you get that greeter job at Walmart, you put 45 bucks into the system. We're Oregon and Idaho in the Northwest's long-term care plan. There is a way out of this. First, I think the actuarial part needs to be figured out. And second, if the people really want it, what I think if the bill comes out of the Senate's going to do is have a referendum clause on it that says, all right, voters, do you want to pay 0.5% payroll tax? Do you want to have this fund? I think that's if the bill moves. I hope if the bill moves, that's what it'll do. And then at least we can say, well, you know what? The voters gave it to themselves at that point. But again, we have to do something in this world, because we're not, for whatever reason, going to convince people to save the money. And of course, not everyone can save the money. And on the counterpoint, Medicare is on us. State portions of Medicare are on us. They're on you. And so there has to be a balancing act. But really, as it's written, again, I'm sounding like a broken record today, but it's a broken bill. You can't put in 45 bucks into anything and get out 36,000, especially when it's not a basic entitlement, a basic social service program. So there's my math problem there. I'm not a bean counter by trade, but I love numbers for some reason.
So the state has two budgets, well, three budgets. They have a transportation budget, not under discussion here. They have an operating budget that pays for all the services and education and that kind of thing. And then our third budget is our capital budget. And the capital budget pays for buildings, infrastructure improvements, those kinds of things. So what we do every year is with our delegation, we get together and we say, what's important to you? What do you want us to work on? And then we get together and hammer it out.
So we get requests for this much, and we get to allocate this much. And this year, there's a variety of subjects, a variety of projects from parks, ball fields, obviously that you mentioned the transportation budget. Cascadia Tech is a wonderful one that the whole county takes advantage of.
Probably historical preservation, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Oh, he cares about historical preservation, so he wants to know that we're. So, yeah.
So in the 18th district, we have a lot of asks and a lot of proposals. We've got ball fields in Washougal. We've got buildings in the Richfield Port. We've got YMCA in Battleground. We've got all sorts of asks in there. We've got this nature park right here at the port that I think we want to help backfill some money for. So right now we're in this point where everyone put in their requests. We're going to see how much money is available, and we're going to go there. I think that we'll figure out what goes into the formula after that. The one thing to be concerned about, and there was an earlier point, this isn't free. This is money that's bonded for 30 years. The state has bonding capacity. We're generally okay there. But again, there's that balancing act. The capital budget also is going to be responsible for fish culverts. I don't know if you've seen these lawsuits, but we have to fix a lot of them. It's going to be responsible for school construction. We've matched part of the money that schools put into construction. It's going to be parks and wetlands and wildlands, and so anything that is an asset will largely come out of that budget. And it goes every 2 years. It goes like everything else.
We could get you a list, though.
But the good news for Mr. DePinto is that Jim Honeyford, who is our Republican chair of capital budget, he is history. So he cares about history. He's like 183, I think. Don't tell him I said that. 132, yeah.
So when the initiative was originally passed, I-502, there were certain places the money went to, but the biggest chunk was supposed to go to the Basic Health Plan of Washington. That doesn't exist anymore. It didn't exist once Obamacare came into play, ACA, whatever you want to call it. And so honestly, most of that money right now is just going back into the general fund. There is some for prevention, a small amount. There is some for education, but really right now it goes into the pot in large part.
No pun intended.
But yeah, I mean,
there's also revenue sharing with the communities that that have some part of the 502 system. So for example, I think Vancouver gets $1 million and some change a year because they have retail establishments. So that money is also shared with the local municipalities.
But yeah, and in McCleary, I don't remember the exact number. We did designate some of it for some of the school programs, but I couldn't give you a firm number at all.
Actually, exactly the opposite. Loosening up restrictions, allowing kids who have been incarcerated 16 hours a day out of their incarceration. I mean, it's exactly the opposite of what you're describing.
Although I've got to tell you, we hear a lot about it. I mean,
yeah.
We have visits from student groups and different sections of the school system, and we hear about the struggles, about the challenges that they face with different students.
And the things happening in our schools right now are crazy. We had at our Ridgefield Town Hall a couple weekends ago, or oh my gosh, at the beginning of session actually. We do a lot of town halls, but the jewel and the jewel pouches, so kids can just put their wrist up to their nose and inhale, and nobody really knows what's happening. When I was a teacher, I'll never forget this as long as I live, cell phone rings in the middle of class, and the girl whips out her phone and just starts a conversation. And I'm thinking it's some kind of joke because clearly no kid, and she's like, "No, Mom, the teacher wants me to hang up." And now I'm like, "Mom, why are you calling your daughter when she's in class?" So it was just, but teachers today are dealing with things that just insanity. And you're right. I mean, I don't know if it's more money is going to make the difference, or I don't know what's happening, but I know what you say is true, because when I hear the stories, I just think, what in the world is going on? But we've got this, you know, super sort of permissive, like, you know, and I think it's fueled by brain research where they say kids' brains aren't fully developed till they're 25, and so you got to cut them some slack and help them have learning experiences. And I don't wholly disagree with that. You're right. We pray that the ledge building elevators don't break down, because it takes so long for us to find an elevator repairman.
Yeah,
honestly.
absolutely.
And Dennis and I, full disclosure, Dennis and I have been working on career and technical education stuff since I became a representative in the House. Yeah. But it's, I do feel, and here I feel compelled to give a nod to Representative Tim Probst, who still is working in the government to try and advance the career technical education piece.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think I'm going to bet you guys voted yes.
Yes.
I'm going to just
and look, everything's on a pendulum, right? We went way too far towards.
We just confirmed we both did.
Thank you.
way too far towards 4-year degrees, which are fine, they're good.
Absolutely.
But what's the ripple effect? The ripple effect is this massive labor shortage, which makes roads more expensive to build, which makes houses more expensive to build, which makes affordable housing unaffordable, which makes the guy, you know, out there fixing the boats out there, I mean, that much more expensive. And so we've compounded our own problems in this respect, too.
Absolutely. So, thank you.
And we're still working on the skills center.
Thank you.
So thank you for those thoughts, and actually thank all of you for those thoughts. Thank you, Ms. Cox, because the world is run by those who show up, and if you keep showing up, you're going to be running the world. I am so appreciative of the civil discourse here today. It seems like it's just lacking everywhere else, and that's one of the things that I love about our district, is that people can disagree on some things, agree on other things, but it's always respectful and kind, and so I'm deeply grateful for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.